All right, hey everyone. Today we have part two of this lesson. I'm here with the mechanical engineer. How you doing?
Very good. How about you?
Good. So last time we have our code up. We went through just some basic for loop syntax. We looped through lists, we looped through strings, and we saw that strings are indexed by their characters and they behave very similarly to lists. So in this lesson, we're actually going to go over the while loop. So I don't know if you're familiar with that from your C++ days. It's pretty similar to a for loop, but the only difference is that what dictates if the loop continues is based on the while loop condition. So
hmm
why don't you go ahead and remove the code we already have written there, just so we can have, you can leave the just leave everything out. All right, great. So why don't you define a variable called x and set it to 25. So now, actually, you know what? Set it to 10. That'll be a little clean. So now what we can do is we can say, and then set another one called A. We'll set that to 0. So now, say we didn't know what X and A were, but you knew that you wanted to run a loop n amount of times while A is less than X. How do you think
hmm
you'd do?
I would, if n is like 10, then we just have to increment by 1. So I would say while a is less than x, like do this. So like go to the next line, make sure you're indented, and then print or like add whatever. But then we're gonna need to add 1 to a, so
Right.
that'll go through 0 to 1 to 2 to 3 all the way up to 10.
So the syntax for a while loop is while. So while, and then you'll do whatever your condition is. So yeah, while A is less. Yep, exactly. There you go. So now what we'll do is we'll actually let's print A squared so we can learn something new here. How do
Um,
you think, just, I'll tell you, but how do you think you would do this? It might be, if you did any MATLAB, I believe the syntax is the same.
maybe
Would you?
like square a, maybe.
No, so basically what it is it's going to be A star star, so multiplying.
Mhm.
So A star star 2. So star star is the power operator. It's a fun
Mhm.
little. There's also in the math library, there's like a pow function, but
Mm.
fine. So we'll print A squared, and then, like you said, how, yeah, go ahead.
A equals a plus 1. I think that's how we did in C++.
Yep, and then actually a little shorthand way to do this is A
A what? Plus.
plus equals 1. Yeah, and then just make sure you put the spaces between, just to make it a little cleaner to read. Get used to
Mm.
doing that for
Okay.
readability.
Yeah.
There you go. So why don't you run this? We'll see what happens.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay. Stopped at
So
9.
now notice that. So what's the last thing you outputted here?
81. 9 squared.
Right. So it doesn't include 10.
Yeah.
So
Because,
something that
yeah.
even when I'm giving mock interviews to students, things like that, sometimes people forget that the while loop condition is checked at the start of each iteration. So when it jumps right in, it's going to check the condition you have there, A less than X. And then
hmm
if it's true, everything is going to be updated. So say you had something below, why don't you have something below, why don't you print A below that?
Is it? Okay.
Yeah, it's going to be a little weird cluttered, but we'll see it pretty well. So why don't you run that?
Okay.
So do you see
Yeah.
how 10 is there? So this is
Yeah.
something that a lot of people kind of forget, that even though it doesn't have like a watcher on your loop,
hmm
it only checks the condition once the loop is done. So when the loop is done, it'll recheck your condition.
Yeah. Makes
So
sense.
you could technically add 1,000 to A at the last loop, and you would maybe have some weird behavior if you didn't realize that the while condition is checked at the end of each loop, and then so I guess at the start of each loop, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I get it.
All right, cool. So that's kind of the basis of while loops. It's kind of a weird, I guess this is a bit of a weird example, but regardless. So along with while loops, we're going to visit them later on. Let's go back to for loops here,
hmm
and we're going to go over this thing called nested loops. So why don't you define two lists, one of integers and one of strings?
Okay, so let's do a list _1
And just put 5 elements in each of them.
equals 3, 6, 11. Can I do negatives?
Yeah, anything you want. And
So
then
you
my list 2, you can just do a list of characters, like strings of length 1, just to save some time.
Okay. 5 as well.
What was that?
5 as well.
Yeah.
Four, 5. Okay.
All right, cool. So now, why don't you just type up the syntax to loop through list 1 there?
Like a condition, a loop or a while loop.
No, we're gonna use for loops again.
For the first one.
Yep, just to loop through and print all those. Or we won't even do anything. We're just gonna get the syntax in there.
Or lm in my list.
Yep. So now let's say, don't worry about the print now. Let's just say, I know you know how to do that from last time. So now, let's say that. So the first iteration of this loop, what do we get?
3.
Right. So now let's say with that number 3, we want to do something with each of the values in my list 2.
Okay.
What do you think you do? Let's say we just want to print the pair. We just want to print the 2 of them.
We want to print 3 with D and then 3 with F and 3 with E.
Yep. And we want to do that with all 5. So 5 times 5, right?
Yeah, just do another for loop, right?
Yep.
Like lm1.
Yeah, that's fine. That is just a placeholder. You can put anything you want there. Usually though, so what I would do in this case would be something like, you want like a descriptive term if you're going to use it in your loop. So for the first one, I would probably say like num, because they're all numbers, right? Because remember, as much as it is important to make it work, it's also equally as important that other people will be able to
understand,
read this and understand it, just with basic understanding of what's going on. So yeah, that's great. For a number, letter, that's great. So then we're just going to print the 2 of them. So how do you think you do
that? Print my list 1, comma.
Okay, so why don't you type this up and we'll see what happens.
Run this?
Go ahead and run that. Yeah, go ahead and run.
Oh, I want the first element.
There you go. Wait, okay, do this, we'll see what happens.
So yep. Num and then let.
Oh, okay. Try this. Yeah. So remember that num and let are the objects themselves. This might be the C++ in you coming out, but so in this case, you actually just want to print num, comma let.
Oh, okay.
Remember we just print lm, right? Yeah, there you go.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, so it's a lot, right? There's a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah.
So something to keep in mind for the future, right, is that if you notice, it gets really, it's exponential when you start having these nested for loops, right?
Yeah.
So let's pretend that we had our first list was 1,000 elements and our second was 50 million elements, right? This would run, your computer would probably stop working. Yeah. So it's really, when we get to the sort of interview question portion of this, this is considered n squared, right? Because we're running through things twice. So having these nested for loops can become very computationally intensive as you kind of, as it grows exponentially, obviously. So,
okay.
So yeah, I think for now, we're good here. Basically, what I wanted you to get out of this was that you have an understanding of for loops, at least looping through elements, that range function, right? While loops, kind of an idea, knowing that the condition is checked at the start of the loop. So even if you increment something and the condition technically fails within the loop, it won't know to quit out of the loop until the scope of the loop is done executing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, do you have any questions? You want to run through anything else related to these?
I think I'm all set for now. Is there like during this part, I was like taking a long time just because I'm not like used to, the syntax, I guess. Is there like a faster way I could have like maybe done something like this?
Just typing it up, you mean?
Yeah.
So strings in Python, you actually don't need to use double quotes. You can use single quotes, and they're equivalent.
Okay.
So I don't know if that'll save you time. Personally, I think I tend to always use single quotes. The only time that you can't always use it is if you wanted to have a quote in your string. So like if you wanted a single quote in your string, then you would have to wrap the whole thing in double quotes, if that makes sense. So it doesn't like terminate. So that's just a quicker way. It looks a little cleaner, especially when you're dealing with characters. Like characters in other languages, you use single quotes to dictate, like the C++ stuff. So yeah, I mean, it really is just kind of a preference, a personal preference, but I think that not hitting the shift key might be a little quicker.
Yeah, you're right.
This is kind of a weird example where, you're not going to have to be initializing lists of characters that often. So,
Gotcha.
All right, great. And you know what? Actually, let's do one other fun thing here, because we talked about lists last time we talked, right? So let's say let's go to the next line here. This will be really quick. So you add numbers together with the plus sign, right?
Yeah.
Why don't you print, or actually, why don't you make my list 3? And then why don't you assign that to my list 1 plus my list 2? And then why don't we print my list 3 below that?
Should I get rid of this maybe?
Yeah, just reduce. Yeah. Right. So this is called concatenation. We can get more into this later on, but just to fun, we had a little bit of time, so I figured it'd be fun to go into it. Basically, you can add lists together just like you add numbers together, and strings work the same way. So if you had 2 strings and you add them together, they're kind of going to be smushed together. So it's just a fun little thing. I figured we had a minute. So
gotcha.
I think a little question I'll ask you next time that you could use or something else.
Gotcha. All right.
So any other questions?
Yeah, I guess last one. Like, why is my list here? Why is it showing like the squiggly again?
Why don't you hover over it? Let's see what it is. Oh, it's because you're concatenating 2 lists of different types, I believe.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Like, you want to do this? That's why it's a green warning. But yeah, you're good.
Cool. All right, I'm all set then, I think.
All right.